Hello, bookish people. I'm here today with a check-in for the Mammoth read, Marching Mammoths. I'm doing Kristin Lavransdatter, and today I'm going to talk about the Wreath, which is sort of the first little third of this book. The Wreath was originally published in 1920 as Kransen by Sigrid Undset, who won the Nobel Prize. And when they were citing her for why they gave her the Nobel Prize for literature, they said one of the things they cited was a powerful descriptions of northern life during the Middle Ages, which I can now testify to, that this indeed is a powerful depiction of Kristin Lavransdatter's starting of her life in the Middle Ages in Norway. It's very much you feel them surrounded rather aggressively, I guess, by nature. It's amazing just how there's some ways that I've read the early parts of Proust where it's like, everything is so alive. This is a book where everything is so alive, and so alive in a way of nature, of that outside of the confines of this small community is the wild. There are people who are still not Christians around. There is just the hardships of nature, and indeed in this book, you see how tenuous things can be, how bad things can get. This is a book that it's a historical fiction, it's a family saga, and it has those things of there's attempted rape, there's murder, there's tragic accidents, there's passionate love affair, there's indeed a marriage at the very end of the book. So this has all those ingredients. It very much starts out like a kind of a Norse saga. Actually, the very first couple of pages, like, oh, how Norse saga is this going to be? But that's kind of like the opening page or two. It felt very much like, okay, this guy married this guy. This guy didn't marry this guy. This guy married this woman and traveled here and that. And it's very schematic, but it then quickly goes back down into the life of Kristin Lavransdatter, a daughter of what is now a guy who seems like he was had the makings of being like a great warrior, a great soldier, a great man, but due to kind of political circumstances and just the times, he's ended up more of a kind of a humble but affluent farmer. He's respected in his community, but this is a very tiny little community. And Kristin, it's crucial at the beginning of this book, a book that's called The Wreath, and a part of it was translated, I guess, initially, the very early translation, as The Wedding Wreath. But Tina Nunnally, who did this translation, very cannily, I think, said, no, it's not just the bridal wreath. This is the wreath, because in the beginning of this book, in a little key scene at the very beginning, Kristin is in the woods and comes upon what seems to be almost this like fantastical character. This is the only kind of time where she just sees, for a brief instance, this woman in kind of clothed in like greenery with like pale eyes and stuff like that, and holding up a golden wreath of flowers and offering and beckoning to her with it. And this idea of what she kind of sees as a kind of an elf princess, or a dwarf princess, of this, like, it's a creature that's like beyond, outside of Christianity, in the wild. And this sort of really kind of keys into this big kind of push and pull that happens with Kristin throughout this book, of kind of that kind of primal part of nature going up against kind of the very kind of devout Christianity of the time. And I'll get into that later. I mean, and this is a book which we have that little scene, but this is very much a kind of a family saga. This is about Kristin and her father, Lavrans. She is Kristin Lavransdatter, and her mother, Ragnafrid, who seems like, at the beginning, a very kind of moody, kind of like, oh, why is she always so kind of depressed? She's like this dark presence. But the real joy of this book is that it's not just about Kristin. It's not just like strictly told from her point of view, but you really delve into the kind of the inner lives of all these characters. which is a part of what really kind of makes it such an immersive experience that teaches you. I have this thing of this book, it almost like it taught me what sin was. It taught me how these people view sin. And I think, you know, as I've been a lot of times, I don't know if I've been a bad, but I've had a resistance to a lot of historical fiction, because it'll be like, oh, well, you just have that modern reaction. It's like, well, you know, why doesn't, like, you know, oh, you're married to this guy. Well, why don't you just tell him to buzz off and go marry somebody else who make you happy? It's like, no, this book does such a good job of immersing you in this world and letting you feel like kind of the Matrix, how everyone is so connected here together, how they depend on each other to survive, and how sin isn't violating a rule in this book. It isn't violating God's rule. Sin is hurting other people, and just the amount of pain and anguish in this book, and how someone's selfishness can really cause great harm and suffering to others, and that is sin. And I mean, this must be such an obvious thing, but this is a book that kind of helped me feel that viscerally, so I didn't feel like I was standing outside going, oh yes, here is somebody who in this society must marry this person because that is how it has been decided and it will help her father and this, and it's like, well, that sucks. It's like, no, you feel how Lavransdatter is trying desperately to find someone for his daughter that is worthy of it, that he sees as worthy as his daughter. He loves his daughter, and that, you know, he is overprotective, but he also is kind of right, because the guy that he kind of ends up hooking up with in a very non-society approved way, in a very passionate love affair, is also someone that he quite correctly sees as been someone whose selfishness has caused harm. Erlen is the fellow, and he is somebody who's taken up with a previously married woman and had children with her. Now these children are going to suffer in this society because they have no legal standing in this society. It's like, and he's done this basically kind of his own selfish things, and his own, as Lavransdatter says, is like, you know, he's not somebody who can restrain himself. And I mean, Kristin is like this young woman. I mean, I think for a large part of this book, she's like 17, 18, 19, like just on that cusp. And a part of this thing of the wreath is the bridal wreath indeed. And it's a transition from being a girl to being a woman, and Kristin's transition to from being a girl to a woman is a very painful, very, you know, she starts out as kind of the innocent and joyful and open, and has such a beautiful relationship with her father, and has kind of a distant relationship from her mother. But as the book, as this part goes on, it's like, wow, you can see the transition of like how someone like her mother, Ragnfrid, kind of, that she may have started out like Kristin, and your kind of heart breaks. So like, oh, is this how Kristin is going to go? Is it going to be even worse for Kristin? Because at least Ragnfrid had someone like Lavransdatter, and indeed, even within that, Sigrid Undset does such a great job of making it such a kind of a complicated relationship between Lavransdatter and Ragnfrid, which I have to work on. But yeah, okay, I'm just going to leave it there. I promised myself I wasn't going to do big long videos on stuff like that, but I just wanted to give you my update of this was thank you, Jason. I took this on one of your this is a book that you had recommended that obviously somehow spoke to me, and I'm really grateful that I picked this up. It's a great immersive book. I feel like I'm being immersed in this this kind of 14th century Norway, and I can't wait to continue on with the other sections. I'm finding, as I'm going through the Mammoth Read, I'm just trying to get sort of my 30 or 40 pages a day, and that's adding up. That adds up quite good. Maybe I didn't have to cheat. Oh well, I cheated. Maybe I know I'm gonna do some other stuff in March as well then, so that's all fine. So yes, this Mammoth is marching along. More videos later.